Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to our Zoom Daily with Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz to a realistic map of meaning. We did take last week off, and we're going to be off for the next few days, but we're here now, and it's so good to be back together. We're joined in our Zoom meeting with our friend Rabbi Jones, and Rabbi Schwartz is ready to go, so let's just turn the class over to him and see how he's doing. Shalom, Rabbi Schwartz. It's been a week. We're glad to be back with you. We're going to turn the class over to you and let you take it from here.
Thank you very much. Glad to be back. We had a wonderful respite and Schwartz, the holiday of Schwartz, was last Friday in Shabbos, and now we're ready to go again into the no more holidays until Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year. Although there is some sad days in between later on in the summer, but that's it for now. So we're going back to where we were, which is over here, I think, if you can see it. Can you see paragraph 12 on the screen? Okay. Okay. So we read paragraph 12, and here's my marker, ZD for notes. We're up to the notes. So just to remind everybody where we were, we're talking about redeeming captives. And it was unfortunately happened many times in the past. I guess it happens still today. There's pirates on the sea, and or different countries, they'll kidnap people and they'll hold them for ransom. And they're not nice people at all. Particularly when they think the victims have money. So this was a perennial problem that had to be dealt with, and of course they might demand a ransom that was beyond the means of the family, but not the community. So it was what was an issue for the community. They had to raise money to redeem their fellow citizens. So the ruling was that not to pay too much. This was a rabbinic ruling, because otherwise you're just encouraging more incidents like this. So the notes read, first note is Rambam states that a captive should not be redeemed for more than his normal value. How can we assign a normal value to human life? The requirement to place a value on human life occurs in many cases discussed in Talmudic literature. Two prominent examples of this are the sale of a person into slavery and the accidental death of a person. Both of these cases require that a price be fixed based on the future earnings of the person in question. That is, no attempt is made to place a value on the personal qualities of the individual. These are imponderable. Only the financial aspects are assessed. And in the case of a person sold into slavery, so sometimes that would happen if someone was a thief and caught, and he didn't have the article that he stole, and so now he has to make payment, and he has to even pay double, and he doesn't have the funds, so he would be sold in slavery. There's all kinds of conditions on that, one of them being that he couldn't be worth more than what he stole. If he was worth more than what he stole, so we just leave him alone. You have to go to work and pay back what you got. It's only when, if you sold him for, in other words, his entire future earnings, so to speak, was less than what he stole. So then you sell him and give the money to the guy that he stole from. The other case was somebody accidentally killed somebody else. So there's a civil suit. You denied us of future earnings. You have to pay for that. Okay, from the Talmudic literature, we know that these cases require the judgment of a court empowered to decide on such matters, not just any three guys or something like that. No doubt the court would make use of the best actuarial concepts available at the time, but the final decision could not be made without the court's involvement. No such courts exist today, or was in existence in Rambam's time. They had lost what's the word I'm looking for? The chain of command, so to speak, from one generation to the next, attesting to the complete knowledge of the Torah of the judges who would be on that court. Nevertheless, the Jewish community has often had to deal with kidnapping situations, including those where exorbitant ransoms were demanded. This has sadly been true both before and after Rambam's time. Accordingly, the question must have arisen how to determine the point at which the ransom demanded was in excess of the person's normal value. The only clue offered by Rambam is that if the ransom is so high, it will encourage the spread of kidnapping, then it is considered excessive and should not be paid. And that's all he can do, is to leave it at that. We don't have an official body that's capable of saying what the value of a person is. So it's you just got to do the best you can. Okay, so note B is the admonition not to redeem the captives when such action would encourage further incidents of kidnapping is most illuminating with regard to our present unfortunate experiences with acts of terrorism. The policy of the government of Israel not to deal with terrorists would appear to be well supported by the ruling stated here. You just encourage them to do more. So you just can't deal with them. Could the same rulings be applied to the current efforts to finance the emigration of the Russian Jewish community? At the time I was writing this, they just let down the Iron Curtain, and many Jews were now able to emigrate from Russia, but you had to pay a lot of money to get them out. For example, the government insisted on being compensated for the value of the education they received under the communist regime, because they could go to presumably the university for free, but they wanted the value of that paid back, and other things like that. And they raised money to do this, to get them out of there. Now you have the same situation somewhat in Ukraine, where a lot of Jews, well, this is more like a refugee situation. A lot of Jews try to escape from the war, and became a huge fundraising activity to help them get established in new areas. Okay, so continuing this, it might be argued not to apply the rulings that just discussed to the emigration of the Russian Jewish community, since there is little likelihood of the USSR capturing more Jews for the purpose of collecting the ransom. So that would be a reason not to compare the two cases. On the other hand, should it become evident that the price of emigration is being boosted faster than inflation, then it might become necessary to re-examine the situation in light of these rulings. But that was a problem at the time. So you see that these ancient problems and issues can be revived under with a new identity or under new circumstances, but the issues are the same. An interesting corollary to this problem may exist in relation to current efforts to reestablish Jewish centers in the USSR. If the costs of doing so were to be dramatically driven up by new regulations and the like imposed by the government, should such efforts be diminished to dissuade similar policies in other like-minded jurisdictions? So, for example, if you go and try to establish, a Jewish center in Russia, and they were to demand, exorbitant fees and regulation to make something up, you need a license to do this, and it becomes very expensive. And if we pay it, well, then the Chinese government's going to do the same thing, or the Ukraine government, or these other dictator territories will do the same thing, as they'll see, they got their hands on a good thing. And you got the same kind of situation in maybe same kind of issue in Uganda, where there may be some communities that see that, hey, the Jews look after each other. Let's apply to be Jewish. That's an issue. Is that what's going on or not? Okay, going back to the Talmud. So this Talmud I put small because I think it's basically, it says just tells over a story that supports what we just learned. Maybe more germane is this. In Gittin, in the laws of divorce, it says captives should not be redeemed for more than the value to prevent abuses. Captives should not be helped to escape to prevent abuses. Rabbi Simon ben Gamliel says that the reason is to prevent the ill treatment of fellow captives. Because if we're trying to help them escape, then their captors will treat them all the worse to prevent that. And the Gemara is the expansion of the Mishnah. The Mishnah was the first iteration of the oral law, and the Gemara came along and expanded that. And so they write on this. The question was raised: does this prevention of abuses relate to the burden which may be imposed on the community, or to the possibility that activities of the bandits may be stimulated? Come in here. Levi ben Darga ransomed his daughter for 13,000 denarii of gold. That's a lot of money. Said, I'll buy it. But are you sure that he acted with the consent of the sages? Perhaps he acted against the will of the sages. So captives should not be helped to escape to prevent abuses. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says that the reason is to prevent the ill treatment of fellow captives. What practical difference does it make which reason we adopt? The difference arises when there is only one captive. What do you do then? And you don't have to worry about anybody else. So on this, the Shulchan Aruch said, and this is just a repetition, I'll just start at the larger words. Still, an individual is permitted to redeem himself for whatever value he wishes. So the guy's got money of his own, and he's been captured. I'll pay whatever whatever I can, negotiate with you. Similarly, a sage, or even one who's not a sage but is a protege and has the possibility of becoming a great man, is redeemed for even large sums. So you could maybe have a standard that when they capture somebody, so nobody pays more than say 5,000, 10,000, whatever it is. And then they got this guy, but this guy could be a lifesaver. So then for him, you're going to pay more. The Ramah adds to this, as to one's wife, when your wife is captured, whether to consider her as a third party or not, consult the Torah and the Ibn Ezra. So that's a problem. It's your wife, it's part of you, but then she's a third party. So you treat her like just somebody who's going to set a bad precedent for yourself if you have the money. So you can negotiate what you want, but what about your wife? She's not her money. Okay, problem. And he continues to Shulchan Aruch. We don't pursue captives in order to free them as a matter of common sense, so that our enemies do not treat them harshly nor maximize their security. So as long as they're not that careful, maybe there's a chance they'll escape on their own. Okay. The next paragraph is, in the case of one who sells himself and or his children to idol worshippers, people did this. They felt they needed to, or they succumbed to the temptation, or who has borrowed from them, and they have captured or imprisoned him on account of the loan. For the first or second time, it is a duty to redeem them. The third time, do not redeem them, but redeem the children after the death of their father. So you have to wait that long. However, if they are intent on killing him, redeem him from their hand even after many occurrences. That's the ruling. So my notes are, in paragraph 10 above, Rambam stated that captives normally stand in peril of their lives. However, towards the end of this paragraph, the case of life endangerment is given special consideration, implying that in the earlier cases of the paragraph, there was no danger to life. This seeming contradiction may be resolved by explaining that in normal cases of capture, we are duty-bound to react to a heightened danger to life. However, in cases where the victim willingly places himself in such a position, we can assume that he would not do so if there was indeed any danger. This remains so until received notice to the contrary. So you have to look at circumstances to really, normally you would think that the guy is in danger of his life, but if the guy, he dealt with them, he knows them, he felt comfortable enough to deal with them. You can have something like that with drug dealers today, where you feel the party. If you're a drug addict and you feel the party, so you make promises that you'll get money, etc., and then you put yourself in a real hole. And now it could be similar to this situation. If we accept the premise that the situation described in the paragraph is not life-threatening, then the duty to redeem the children must be examined. Why does the father's death suddenly revisit upon us the duty to redeem these captives if the duty was not previously in existence? I mean, if we're not worried about their death, so what's the problem? Perhaps the reason is that the duty to redeem the children is not by virtue of the commandment to redeem captives, but because it is the duty upon all of Israel to instruct the children in the ways of Judaism. While the father is alive, this was not possible because he would usurp our authority. But with his death, this is now possible. Some support for this view may be found in the concluding paragraph of the Talmudic source cited above. Did I skip that or what? Above would mean below. I haven't done that yet because I reordered this. So the Mishnah said, if a man sells himself and his children to a heathen, he is not to be redeemed. His children, however, are to be redeemed after the death of their father. So that Rambam recorded that as is. The Gemara says, Rabbi said, this rule applies only if he sold himself a second and a third time. Certain Jews of Bemex borrowed money from heathens, and when they were unable to pay, the latter seized them for slaves. They appealed to Rabbi Huna, who said, what can I do, since we have learned if a man sells himself and his children to a heathen, he's not to be redeemed. Rabbi Abba thereupon said to him, you have taught us, master, that this applies only if he has sold himself a second or third time. Rabbi Huna replied, these men do this habitually. A certain man sold himself to Lydians and then appealed to Rabbi Ami, saying, redeem me. So he said, we have learned if a man sells himself and his children to a heathen, he's not to be redeemed, but his children are to be redeemed after the death of their father to prevent their going astray. All the more so here, where there's a danger of their being killed. So that's all I can quote there. And you'll see that continues for another section. So the Shulchan Aruch basically repeats that ruling. There's nothing new there. I'll go on to paragraph 14. A Canaanite slave who was captured. Now, a Canaanite slave is a special status, is a non-Jew who is, they had slaves. And basically what they were in Jewish culture was they were long-term employees, like a lifetime contract. But they were treated like part of the family. They had to accept to keep all the mitzvahs that the women would keep. They had to keep. So they were basically part of the Jewish family. And if they didn't accept that, you could keep the guy for a year to test him out. But if you didn't accept it, then you have to sell him, get rid of him, somebody else, to a non-Jew, whatever. I mean, the standard that in those days was that there were slaves. People had nowhere to go. So that was it. So anyway, so if he was part of your family, part of your entourage, and he was captured, since he performed immersion for the purpose of becoming a Jewish slave, that was part of it, like he's half converted, and has accepted upon himself the commandments, he must be redeemed just like a Jew who was captured. He's like a regular Jew. On the other hand, in reference to a captive who turns to idol worship, even of a Jew, but he turned to idol worship, even with regard to but one commandment, for example, one who has eaten the flesh of a deceased animal in spite. In other words, he knows that was forbidden, but he did it out of spite, not out of hunger and the like. It is forbidden to redeem it. So a guy like that, who is in defiance of God's laws, so you're forbidden to redeem him. God had him captured to teach him a lesson. What are you getting involved for? My notes are, normally, the act of conversion requires three things of a male: circumcision, immersion in a mikveh, which is a ritual bath, and the acceptance of the commandments. Rambam only quotes two of the three here. He didn't quote the circumcision, I think. Yeah, he said immersion and accepted the commandments. So I just mentioned that because it's surprising. When it comes to actually recording what you got to do, of course, there has to be circumcised too. It's one of the commandments. You accept the commandments, then you've got to become circumcised. Number B, the second case in the paragraph refers to a captive who becomes a heretic. Presumably, the same law would apply to a confirmed heretic who then becomes a captive. In other words, a regular Jew. who became a captive. And note C is, why is it forbidden to free him as opposed to not required? Why did the Romans say you're forbidden to free him as opposed? He could have just said you're not required. You don't have to bother with the guy. So from the Ramah's comment in Shulchan Aruch 25102, we can surmise that the reason is rooted in the general admonition not to cavort with apostates. So don't have something to do with them. That's coming up. So the Gemara in Gittin and the divorces, Rabban Shimon Gamliel said to them, just as it is a religious duty to redeem free men, so it's a religious duty to redeem slaves. And now continue from preceding paragraphs that I interrupted before. The rabbi said to Rabbi Amma, this man is a non-observant Israelite who has been seen eating non-Jewish meat. He said to them, possibly he did so because he wanted meat and can get no other. He was hungry, or he had a lust. They said, well, there have been times when he had the choice of permitted and forbidden meat, and he left the former and took the latter. He preferred the forbidden meat. He thereupon said to the man, be off, they will not let me ransom you. In other words, he was prepared to help the guy, but they're pointing out that he's taking himself out of our community. Let's not deal with him. And you read between the lines, he may have known this about the guy, but he's still willing to redeem him. But other people took exception, so sorry, I can't help you. Okay, so the Shulchan Aruch says the same thing. Here's something a little different. Regarding one who has intentionally transgressed any one of the commandments and has not repented, we are not obligated to sustain him nor to lend him money to redeem himself. Ramah says, nevertheless, we feed the heathen poor along with the Jewish poor in the interest of harmony. That we had way back in chapter 1, almost from the beginning of our studies here. But here I noticed that the Shulchan Aruch, I don't know if I noticed this before, but so he is clearly saying, not forbidden. You're not forbidden to help him. You just don't have to bother. Here he says it's forbidden. Over here, regarding when it's intentionally transgressing, it hasn't repented. So there's a difference between intentionally transgressing and transgressing in spite. I should maybe keep this open. So here he's saying the guy transgressed intentionally. He didn't have to do this. And he hasn't said he's sorry for doing it. So, but it's not forbidden to help him. You just don't have to bother. But here, one who's done it in spite, so he's defying. He's trying to set an example for everybody. Don't do this. So this kind of guy, you're forbidden to help. Ramah says, but if he transgressed out of temptation, there is no prohibition if there is a desire to redeem, although there is no obligation. So it looks like they were really grappling with this issue of, they didn't want to be so cruel or so exclusionary to exclude him. They wanted to try and give him every benefit of the doubt that they could, but if he's clearly a rebel and taking himself out of the community on purpose in defiance, so then you're forbidden. Paragraph 15. A woman takes precedence over a man. This is back to the Rambam. A woman takes precedence over a man with regard to feeding and clothing her and rescuing her from captivity. This is because it is in the nature of a man to go about, but not in the nature of a woman. In other words, door to door begging. Therefore, her shame is greater. However, if both of them were in captivity and they both were lusted after, then the precedence for redemption goes to the man, for this would be perverse for him. So, in other words, normally if it's just a man and a woman in captivity, you worry that they want to violate her, not going to violate him. So then she would have greater precedence. But if they're prepared to violate him too, then that makes him in a more dire circumstance than her. Paragraph 16. Should both a male and female orphan be presented to the community for subsidizing their wedding ceremonies, they should contribute to the wedding of the female in precedence to the male, for the shame of a woman is greater. In doing so, they should not provide her with less than the sum of 6.25 dinars of pure silver. Moreover, if there are sufficient funds in the community chest, they should provide for her according to her social standing. So if she was, let's say, the orphan of a very wealthy person who no longer has any money, so they should make her a big feast that their father would have done if they have the money. The notes on this are the cases described in paragraph 15 with the captives present us with a dramatic lesson regarding the depth of understanding that we must attain when considering the deprivations of others, to the point of comprehending the extent of their innermost feelings. These examples assuredly extend our understanding of the concept of dai machsoro, providing what the pauper lacks, that we had when we first opened these pages. It is not only the physical necessities of life that we must provide, but also an environment of emotional comfort as well. Indeed, upon reflection, it may be discovered that the minimum physical requirements can be defined as those that allow a basic level of self-esteem. And start thinking about it. That's the conclusion I came to. Note B, probably Rambam's main goal in paragraph 16 is to identify another instance where the shame of a woman is greater than that of a man, which is why I put them together. The first instance having been presented in the preceding paragraph when they're both captives. The condition of orphanhood is mentioned, no doubt, for the purpose of providing a likely example. The same would hold true for individuals otherwise impoverished. Note that in chapter 7, paragraph 3, it was already established that the needs for getting married fall within dei machsoro, providing what they're lacking. Note C, the minimum endowment stated by Rambam would assuredly change according to the living standards of the day. Because a specific amount is identified, Rambam goes on to reiterate the underlying obligation to provide the person with all that he or she is lacking. And note D, Rambam states that if there are sufficient funds in the community chest, the provision should be according to the bride's social status. What if there's just enough to do so? Rambam suggests no guidelines for building reserves against future needs. Since the obligation to give is one with the obligation to give dei machsoro, whereas the same words command you to give charity, they at the same time they command you to give what he's lacking. And if you have it, that's what you should give. Perhaps we should conclude that funds that are available should be dispersed as the needs arise, on the premise that future needs will be satisfied as well as possible by future donations. So unless you know that there's something coming down the road, but you have a need right now and you have the funds, look after it. That could be, look at what's going on right now in the States with the debt ceiling and the deficit. So, you always have to look at the future, but if you don't know the future, if there's nothing particular that's coming up. Now, if you know that, let's say, for on a personal example, you have money in the bank, but your property taxes are coming up soon. You have to pay thousands of dollars to pay that bill. Well, then the money's for that. You can't say, "Well, I got money now, so let me help the pauper." You have an obligation that's coming up. But if there's some bill that might come in the future, you never know. There's a rainy day, save for a rainy day. No, if you have charity funds, I mean, you can have a fund for a rainy day. But we're talking about where you have your 20%, let's say your 10% fund, even though, and you don't know about some future charitable need, and this guy's presenting, and he could use, let's say he needs a major repair on his car in order to make a living. So, and you have the funds, and that's what you should do. Give him all the funds that he needs. That would be a big mitzvah. The Gemara in Hurriyath. Hurriyath was the tractate dealing with the court's decisions. Mishnah says a man takes precedence over a woman in matters concerning the saving of life and the restoration of lost property. The man comes first. And a woman takes precedence over a man in respect of clothing and ransom from captivity. So when you have to make a decision, the man's life is considered more worthy, and the fact that his property, lost property, that he needs his property more so than a woman does need hers, because the woman is used to relying on male relatives, but the woman takes precedence in terms of modesty and freedom from violation. When both are exposed to immoral degradation in their captivity, the man's ransom takes precedence over that of the woman because it's more perverse for him. Okay, that's the Gemara. Rather, that's the Mishnah. The Gemara says, our rabbis taught if a man and his father and his teacher were in captivity, he takes precedence over his teacher, and his teacher takes precedence over his father. Well, his mother takes precedence over all of them. So he has funds, and he has to redeem himself and his father's teacher. So how do you parcel it out? That's the order you go. A scholar takes precedence over a king of Israel. For if a scholar dies, there's none to replace him. Well, if a king of Israel dies, all of Israel are eligible for kingship. Nobody's irreplaceable. But some people are replaceable. If they're a great scholar, it's not easy to replace a mind and an education like that. The Gemara in Ksubos dealing with marriage contracts. If an orphan boy and an orphan girl applied for a marriage grant, the girl orphan is enabled to marry first, and the boy orphan is married afterwards, because the shame of a woman is greater than that of a man. So Shulchan Aruch on this says, should both a man and woman approach requesting food, we give precedence to the woman over the man. The same applies when they approach requesting clothes. Similarly, should both a male and female orphan approach to get married, we first marry off the female. So he adds a little difference here. He's giving food to the woman over the man. Did Rambam say that? I forget. Just going back. This was in 15. Feeding. Yes, he said. Feeding and clothing her. Okay. So that's the same as Rambam. Then he says, we redeem first a woman captive and then a man, unless the captors are prone to sodomy, in which case we redeem the man first. And on this, the Rama adds, if they're both threatened by drowning, the man is saved first, which is consistent with the Rama. If a man and his wife are in captivity, his wife is prior to him. Moreover, the court can seize his property in order to redeem her, even if he is standing before them and commanding them, oh, redeem her, save me. He's not a babe. So we basically take away his property to do the right thing. Shulchan Aruch says, when a man applies to get married, they should not give her less than 50 zuz. If there are sufficient funds, they should provide her according to her station. So this 50 zuz now replaces the dinars that was mentioned in the Gemara, or by the Rambam. And Ramah says, see chapter 257 below, as to whether the treasurers have to borrow. Oh, so that was something we never discussed, about where the treasurers may want to borrow funds they can't collect anymore from the community. These guys are over their league, but they feel they can borrow and pay it back later. That's an interesting case. I think it'll be taken up in more detail in the next chapter. Paragraph, we're out of time. Paste my marker here. This is almost the last paragraph. So that's it. So I got one whistle out of Dan. I don't know anybody else was surprised at the content, but again, anybody have any comments or questions? sbs447@gmail.com. I welcome everybody. That's sbssambobsam447@gmail.com. Back to you, Dan.
Well, thank you so much, Rabbi. Robbie, have you got any questions for the Rabbi?
Thank you, Rabbi. No, not at this time.
Yeah, it's pretty intricate, well thought out material. You can tell it's been tried and tried and tried, and situationally corrected or adjusted, or well thought out before any ruling is put forward on it. And it's
That's
all about
magic of
fairness, for
Rambam.
sure.
That is all the magic of Rambam. Amazing a feat of pulling in from so many sources and organizing it and presenting it in such an order that's really nobody else did that before him.
Wow. Yeah, amazing man. I definitely have studied as much of his material as I could get my mitts on, and it's a joy to be able to understand the wisdom behind it. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing with us tonight. Now, folks, we're not going to be on tomorrow, Tuesday, or Wednesday, but we will be back Thursday with more Zoom Daily with Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz. So we're going to sign out for now, but we will be back then, and we'll get more routinely going after that. We're even talking about adjusting times so that we're making it a daily Zoom Daily. And it's just life gets sometimes in the way, and I've had to work a few extra shifts, and it just times don't coordinate. But we're working on it, and we appreciate everybody tuning in. We hope you enjoyed it, and tune in on Thursday, same time. That's 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific, and we'll be back with more of the mitzvos of charity. So till then, have a wonderful, wonderful week, everybody. Bye for now.
Good night, everybody.